Hey, and welcome back to our shop just outside Kennesaw here in Morris, Georgia. Well, we're moving on with the restoration of this Singer sewing machine. The next step is to deal with the large veneer issues. The insides of the lid and the insides of the trim pieces that came with the machine are in pretty good shape, and I'd like to save that original veneer. So we're just going to take care of reveneering the top and the desktop, and we're going to get on that right now. This is the flip-up lid, the top of the flip-up lid, and you can see we've got this veneer is really just pretty well destroyed. It looks like somebody tried to sand it over here and went right through. On the underside, however, the veneer is in good shape, and that will refinish nicely. We're going to leave that right where it is. It's down nice and tight. It's original, and this is where it belongs. So the first step today is to get this top veneer off. And the way I do that is with heat, with a putty knife or a scraper, and a lot of patience. And remember, this veneer is valuable because it is old, it's original, and it's great for patching things. So I do my best to save the biggest pieces of this I can as I take this off. So let me get set up. We'll start to take this off. And here it is with the veneer stripped off. There's what we were able to save of the veneer. And I've been working on the desktop regarding the veneer on it. And I've discovered that the veneer is down extremely tight on the left side of this piece. Where we had problems was in this area right here, and you can see for yourself that darkness. That's where water got in and buckled the veneer, and then when someone tried to sand it, they sanded right through it. So what I've done is I've removed the veneer just through here, and the reason I chose this is because once this collar is installed and the flip-up portion of the lid is installed, the seam would be completely hidden. And if this is the veneer that we will use, look how tight that seam is going to be. It's exactly the same height, so we're not going to have any trouble with that. Okay, let me show you how I take care of the hardware, or at least begin to take care of the hardware. These are the pieces that support the machine itself. I've got some lacquer thinner here. It's colored because I just took some other pieces out of it, and I just drop these in this lacquer thinner, and to keep odors down in the shop, just cover it up with a piece of aluminum foil, and I let that sit for quite some time, several hours at a minimum. And here are the drawer hooks. They just came out of the lacquer, and I'm just taking a toothbrush and I'm just brushing them off. I'm knocking off any of the grease, the dirt, any of the loose paint that came out. And then the next step is over to the wire wheel. Let's do that right now. I'm going to leave my gloves on only because I need to get back there and do some more lacquer work. But just as demonstration, that's right down in bare cast iron, and that's ready to be repainted. And a bit of a surprise, these hinges are solid brass. And this one here, after the wire wheel, that's what it looked like when it came out of the lacquer thing. So we can polish these up. We don't have to paint them. That's great news. And after they've been polished up, you can just put a real thin top coat of lacquer on them, and that will protect them from tarnishing again. They're going to look great on the machine. Hello and welcome back. We had to take a two and a half week break while we waited for the veneer order to arrive. I had to order a full 4x8 sheet. I was only about that much short with what I had here, so that was a little bit unfortunate, but now I've got plenty of extra, I suppose. So while we were gone, I spent a lot of time taking care of all the little veneer issues on the edges of any of these pieces, normally the veneer or the substrate will start to delaminate, and it's just a tedious process of identifying what's loose, getting it cleaned out, getting it glued, moving on to the next one, etc. But we've got all the pieces, all the flat pieces have been taken care of. They've all been glued down. All the veneer repairs have been done, with the exception of the two big pieces that we'll take care of now. So the first step is to sand the substrate pieces, and we'll do that with 120 so we get a pretty good bite. I'm going to be using 10 mil back veneer on this, and I'm going to put it down with contact adhesive. That avoids the issue of me having to figure out how to clamp these large pieces in the absence of a vacuum press, which I do not have. So the back veneer with the contact adhesive has worked very well in the past, and that's what we'll do again today. Enough talking, let's get to work. We got sand these, then we'll get the veneer on. And that'll do just fine. And then along this seam that I want to remain very straight, I'll just sand this by hand. And the way I'm going to choose to position this piece is to line it up so I think that the grain lines are as close a match as I can get them. Now remember, this old veneer is 100 and some years old. This other stuff is brand new. And then what's really important is a nice tight seam. So I'm going to push that seam in there nice and tight. And this tape should act like a hinge. Keep that right where it needs to be while we apply the adhesive to both. It needs to be thoroughly stirred, which it has been. I'll apply it to both surfaces with this brush. We let it dry 15 or 20 minutes, and then it goes, then you put the two halves together, they'll bond instantly. So let's get to it. Okay, let's do the same thing for the other piece. The manufacturer says to let it sit and dry for 15 to 20 minutes, and then they need to be attached within 2 hours. Okay, here we go. Okay, that's down real good. Let's get the other one. What you want to do here is make sure that you've got your overhang. This is not the time to try for a precision fit. Okay, that's down nice and tight. We're just going to let everything set for a while, and then we'll trim off the excess later. And the finish on the flat parts of this project is very brittle. And I'm able really to get the majority of it off just by lightly scraping it. And I took just a few minutes with a scalpel and a straight edge and trimmed off the excess veneer. And that's the top. Looking good. Good morning, it's the next day. I think we're finally ready to start refinishing this project and get it on its way out of here. First step is to strip off the old finish. As I showed you before, on most of the flat parts we have a lot of compromised finish that we'll probably be able just to scrape and sand off. But on the drawers and perhaps on the front of the garage, we're probably going to have to use stripper. So let's get to it. Okay, the first part is this collar here. We were able to strip most of the finish off, but we still need to sand it flush. So let's see how it responds to sanding. Yeah, using the sandpaper or the sander, that came out great. And now all we've got to do is the edges. I tend to do these just like this by hand. You can use one of those flexible sponge sanders if you want, or wrap your sandpaper in a dowel, whatever is most comfortable for you and whatever works. Well, after quite a lot of sanding and scraping and hand sanding, we've got these flat pieces ready to go. You got to remember also that this piece here flips up, so that needs to be refinished. One of the things I did notice is there's an awful lot of black in this finish, probably a black grain filler. So we'll keep that in mind as we move forward. And of course the big challenge is going to be color matching the new veneer to the old. Okay, we've got these pieces over here that need to have the finish removed. Probably use a stripper on these, so let me get set up and we'll get cracking. Okay, let's start with the drawer. Take the knob off. There's the knob. And get some liquid stripper right on here. I don't think this finish is going to be too tough to get off. Well, you can really see that quarter sawn oak once this opaque finish comes off. Let's take some 4/0 steel wool. Yeah, I hope you can see how this finish is coming right up. Beautiful. Okay, lots to strip. Let me get to it. And everything is stripped. It's time now to do a lacquer thinner scrub to get rid of any remaining residual finish, and then of course I'll do a visual to make sure I haven't missed anything. I just take some steel wool, dip it in some lacquer thinner, and give the piece a good scrubbing. And while I'm doing it, I'm looking to see if there's any big pieces of finish that need to be scraped off or removed any other way. And I'm working on the drawer, and I had neglected to show you, if we have any extra finish, we can scrape it off. And then using the steel wool and the lacquer thinner, give it a good scrubbing, and it'll usually take off whatever might still be there. And then once you've got it scrubbed, just wipe it off with a towel, and you can see what's coming up. And the last step of the process that I use is just to wipe the piece down with a damp rag dipped in, that's dampened in water. The water will neutralize the stripper.
and prevent it from having a reaction with your finish.
I've mixed a little perfect brown dye stain in with quite a little bit of acetone to dilute it, and what I'm going to do now is apply a very light coat to try to get the colors a little bit closer. I used a piece of leftover veneer, and I think we're pretty close. So this will at least give us a start. Super light coat. Definitely don't want to soak this stuff in. Just trying to pull the colors a little bit closer together. That's a step in the right direction. I know it still looks light on the camera, but it's not that far off up close. So I think I'm going to leave it right there. Okay, with all the stripping and veneer work done, I think we're ready to start finishing this. We have a real disparity in colors here, from the color of this to the color of this to the new veneer. So I think what I want to do is seal everything up, then we're going to grain fill the new veneer, seal that again, and then from that point forward we'll start to work on color matching the entire thing. So the next step is to begin sealing. Here we go. And this is what I use for my lacquer sealer. Everything's going to get a coat front and back. And everything has its first coat of sealer on it. Okay, we're getting ready to grain fill. And this is the existing veneer. And if you look in these grain lines, or this grain depressions or grain pits, you see they're all black. That's because they've been filled with a substance called grain filler. Let me take you to the other side. And here's the new veneer, and you can see it doesn't have the black in it. So what we need to do is we need to grain fill this, both to match them and also so that the finish doesn't have that open grain look, which is what it will have if we leave this as it is. So the next step for us is grain filling. And this is the grain fill medium that we use, that I use. This is oil base, and if you can see, it's really just a really fine powder. I'm not sure what it's made of. That's suspended in an oil medium, and the idea is for us to put this on and then work it into the grain pits and scraping as much off of the surface as we can. Then when it dries, we sand it and it comes off the surface and stays and fills those grain pores. So let's get started. And what I'm doing is going against the grain to force that fill right into it. I know it looks a dreadful mess, but it'll all work out in the end. We've got the board fairly well covered, so the next step is to start to scrape this off going in a diagonal, and you're okay to put this back in the can. I'm going to use a little mineral spirits to get the excess off the sides here. Now, because we've sealed this piece first, this isn't going to penetrate the surface wood. It's only going to fill the voids occasioned by the grain. And now what you want to do is wipe it off diagonally to the grain
So you're forcing the grain filler in. And hopefully it shows up on the camera how we filled that grain in. And I think you can see now how dark those grain lines have become. And the more of this we wipe off the surface, the cleaner our surface becomes. But that's how we grain fill. And that's what it looks like. We're going to leave it set overnight. We'll light sand it tomorrow, and we'll keep moving forward. All right, I got to get the top done. That's next. And we've got 2 coats of sealer on all of this. 1 coat of sealer and grain filler on those. Good day. See you tomorrow.
Good morning, it's the next day. Next step is to sand off any of this grain filler that might still be laying on the surface in anticipation of moving forward. And hopefully you can see the grain filler powdering up as we sand it off the surface. And now that we've got the grain fill sanded off the surface of the pieces, we seal it, so it gets another coat of sealer. And I'm in the process of starting to blend these colors, and what I've done, I'm sorry I got a little bit ahead of myself, I didn't film it all, but I started with a little bit of raw sienna glaze on the new piece of veneer to get a little bit more gold in it, and then I went with some raw umber to try to match the browns, and now I'm going over it with some Van Dyke brown because the drawers, the drawer frames, and the cradle have an awful lot of red in them. We had extremely disparate colors and textures here, and by using the glaze we're getting a whole lot closer. And then once the glaze sets up, we can shoot a top coat over it and then let that dry and drop back and plunk, and then use toners to match them up. But we're getting there, fortunately. And I'm putting some Van Dyke brown glaze now on the collar. Try to match it up, obviously, with everything else. Glaze is a pigmented coloring medium that's designed to go between top coat layers. So we've got 2 layers of sealer down here. So this glaze will just lay on top. One of the benefits of using glaze is that if it doesn't come out the way you want it, you can just wipe it back off with some mineral spirits. And in this instance, on this project, this glaze is the answer to get all these disparate colors pulled back together into the same family. But we just tool it out and then wipe off the excess onto a rag and get the color the way we want. Always make sure that you're brushing in the direction of the grain, otherwise it will look completely unnatural down the road. That gives us a beautiful walnut color with some red in it. So this morning we were able to use glaze to pull these colors together. We have, as I've said before, some real disparate colors. The flat pieces, the tabletop, the lid, and the collars were all different color. Of course, the new veneer was completely unfinished. And then we had a different color on the drawers, the drawer cases, and the cradle. So by using the glaze, we've got everything pulled pretty close together. So the next step now is to apply some lacquer to seal in the glaze coats, and then once the lacquer is on, we can look at the colors again, and if we have to adjust them a little bit using some toners, we can. So the next thing that I will be doing is shooting some lacquer on these, so here we go. And again, this is the results of our glazing, and I'm really pleased with the results. As you can see, everything is starting to pull together. Okay, all the
the flat pieces have actually another coat of sealer and a coat of lacquer. They're looking good. There's our drawers, drawer casings, they all got a coat of lacquer. The cradle got a coat of lacquer. And this is the underside of the top. This has just got its first coat of glaze, so we're going to need to leave this for a couple of hours. And when this glaze hardens up or dries up, then we will be able to shoot this with the lacquer and also lacquer the top of the top because that's flipped upside down right now. Okay, we've pretty well got a rope around this. The colors are pretty close. We've got coats of lacquer on everything. Everything's drying. What we'll do over the next couple of days is shoot a coat of lacquer, sand it down. Shoot another coat of lacquer, sand it down. Start to build the finish up. As we see how things are looking, we may do minor color adjustments, either with glaze or toners. You've seen that before. So what I think I'm going to do is just get the rest of this color work done and this top coating work done, and we'll reconvene here when that's done to reassemble this machine. But I think you've got an idea of how I do it. This is the initial results. I'm very, very happy with it. So I will see you when it's time to put this machine back together. Thanks. And hey, we're about a week later from the last time we met. I know for you it's just a second, but for me it's been a week or so. Basically what I did is I took a couple of days and I just laid coats of lacquer on, sanded it, put another coat of lacquer on. I think everything's got about 7 coats of finish on it now. We're ready to reassemble this machine. So let's do it. What do you say we start by assembling the knobs back onto the drawers? Cleaned off the screw head, put a little paraffin wax on the threads. I think that looks pretty nice. And remember, these were polished with Brasso. That's the color they came from the factory, solid brass. put the hinge in the lid. Remember, this is the short set of screws that you use here. The longer ones go on the other side. This little mark here, the owner requested that I leave that. That's where the original owner had shut the lid onto the machine and dented it, and it shows the wear. I think it's pretty cool. I'm glad we left it. Well, there she is, all fixed. I don't even want to tell you how many hours I have in this thing. It's embarrassing. A lot. More than 40. Many more than 40. This machine was completely disassembled and completely redone from the ground up. And there were lots of little challenges I didn't film. This little machine pretty well fought me almost all the way. But we got it done, and it looks absolutely beautiful. Well, I sure do appreciate you sticking with me through this video series. I hope you enjoyed it. Maybe you learned something. I hope so. It's always fun working on these old sewing machines, but boy, they take a lot of time. So from our shop just outside Kennesaw here in North Georgia, best regards, thanks for watching, take good care, and remember, it's just wood, color, and some shiny stuff. We'll see you next video. Bye.